The title of this is Work Cultivating the Garden. So we are collectors of raw information, material, whatever it is, and we organize it and glorify God through it. So that's the big thing. Now, years ago, when I was just starting out in business, and I get to the job of my dreams, because I had gotten into Westinghouse as a technician, worked for, I don't know, maybe 9 months to a year, and then I did these career ops within the organization, and I applied for this job that I'll never get this, because it was a field engineer traveling all around the world. It was like 70% travel, and I'm saying, man, that's the ticket. That's what I'm looking for right there. Sure enough, I get the job. So I get this wonderful job, and I'm taken around by the seasoned veterans, because I was the young guy. I was in my mid-20s, and all these other guys, they were at least in their 50s. Some of them were in their 60s. And so each one of them takes me around on the various trips, and then they show me the ropes. And the ropes are that when you go out, for the expense account at that time, you were allotted $25 a day to eat domestically, $35 internationally. So they would coach me and school me and say, okay, here's what you put down. But I usually go to McDonald's and I eat here, and I end up spending like $10 a day, but I put down 22 and 23. I don't want to rough the edges here. And my dad never sat me down and said, this is ethics. This is what you do in business. This is how you do it, son. You don't cheat. You don't lie. So I just wanted to conform to the guys. I didn't want to create any waves. So my boss, my new boss, fortunately, he was a man that saw that, and he maybe even knew that was coming. He pulls me in his office. He says, looking at this expense account, did you actually spend $24 to eat your meals? And this was back in the 80s, so $24 was a lot of money. I could still eat for $25 a day today because of the way I had eaten. But I said, no. He says, well, you know what? You just put down what actually you spend. Don't you worry about those other guys. They don't have to know. They don't see what you're putting down on your expense account. You just do that. And so I learned a valuable lesson at that time, that ethically in the workplace, and I was a Christian at that time. I had committed my life to Christ about 3 or 4 years earlier, and so I knew better, but I was under the peer pressure thing. So those are the ethical part that he was talking about. But he also jumped into the aspect of keeping the Sabbath. And so we're going to do a little bit of exegesis and hermeneutics, which are our fancy words, then and there and the here and now, on the Sabbath. And so it's really interesting when you start digging into the scripture verses. And so I look at the 10 Commandments. Moses is given the 10 Commandments. He goes up to the mountain. God talks to God face to face. All right? And he is given these 10 Commandments. The first set, before the golden calf, God wrote these. So if you've ever seen the movie The 10 Commandments, it's kind of cool how they did it. And for back then, that was kind of interesting technology, how they did that. Yes. And I'm thinking, boy, that's if I'd want the 10 Commandments written, that's the way I'd want to see it, man. That was cool. That was cool. All right? So I see those flashes coming in there, and he's writing the 10 Commandments, and a lot of people, the old thing of, they're not the 10 suggestions, they're the 10 Commandments. So God writes these down, and if you look at the 10 Commandments and you break them down into pieces, you could say, and I've never heard a teaching on this, but you could say they're hierarchical, which means they go in order of importance. Now, we might tend to disagree on that and look at that and say, well, what are the most egregious violations of the 10 Commandments? And obviously the one to us would be, thou shalt not, and it says, a lot of translations, kill, but it's actually murder. So there's nothing wrong with killing when we're in war and this enemy is about to kill us. We are permitted to kill him. So it's really not technically thou shalt not kill, it's thou shalt not murder. And which just means it's an innocent person, and they shouldn't have been killed. They didn't deserve to be killed. And then the next egregious one might be adultery. We might look at those. But if we look at this order here, and what the Keller series is teaching us, he's talking about there's plenty of good people in the world, and they violate the first commandment, which is to love the Lord your God only. That's the commandment they're violating, because they have some kind of idol in their life. They could be very good, follow all the commandments, and be having idols in their lives, whether it's material idols, whether it's another person, their wife, their family, whatever, as an idol. So we go down that list, and the first three deal strictly with God. Have no other gods before me. Don't make any shapes or images, carve any images, and don't take the Lord's name in vain. So 1, 2, 3, bam, bam, bam. Next one, if we're going hierarchical, keep the Sabbath. And if you notice, keep the Sabbath is a proactive. It's not a don't, it's a keep. It's a do. Next one, honor your father and your mother. It's a do. All the rest of them, don't. So we got 2 items here. It's 2 do's. And all the rest of them, shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make any graven images, and you shall not take the Lord's name in vain. And we've got these 2 sort of stuck in there. And the Sabbath sort of bridges the gap. And if we're talking about this hierarchical thing, number 4, keeping the Sabbath? This is quite a dilemma. And what would you say, guys, is the easiest one in the church today? Nobody talks about it, and nobody really cares, and just about everybody violates it. It's keep Sabbath. Nobody really cares much about that Sabbath thing. There's no immediate consequence. I don't see it right in front of my face. It's not the stove. I stick my hand on the oven and it burns it. I don't see any of that stuff. But it's one of those obedience commandments, I think. And ultimately, in the long run, if we would ever go from the bird's eye view and see the big picture, we would see that not keeping the Sabbath is killing us. It's crushing us. When I was in grad school and I was doing my PhD, I was working full-time, and my job had a lot of demands, and I was still putting in 45 and 50 hours a week at least at my job. And then I decided to pursue this PhD because I had the great father wound, and I was constantly trying to please people. Okay, found that out later. It's great, I'm glad I got my PhD, but I found out one of my motivators and one of my driving forces for getting that PhD was to constantly please and achieve. All right, so it was a wrong reason. Ended up turning out okay, but I'm doing this PhD, which is demanding, and it's a full-time program. I'm doing a full-time job, and I know a lot of people, a lot of couples end up getting divorced through this kind of thing. It's just not easy. And so I'm not keeping a Sabbath. I'm studying. That's my only time I can study. I don't have time during the week. And sometimes I had to work weekends. So I lost my whole weekend, and I'm having to keep up this pace online and take these questions and answer these questions and do all this writing and literally write hundreds of pages of papers. Thousands by the time you're done. All right? So I'm writing all this, and I'm under this pressure, and I don't have time to take off the Sabbath. So it comes to pass that I'm starting this one day. I get up and I'm driving to work, and I ate my breakfast, and I'm driving to work, and I feel like I got to throw up. And so I go pull over the side of the road because I don't want to be embarrassing, you know. So I'm pulling over, and I pull over so that I can at least open the car door and people can partially not see me. There was a place that I could pull over, and I'm dry heaving. I'm going, what the heck? Because there's no direct correlation between being in the car and feeling a lot of pressure. Those two just don't line up. There's no cause and effect there. But boy, there's all this stuff churning in my head, and then I go to work, and I'd get to work, and I'd be working there, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I'm working, and nothing high pressure or anything, and all of a sudden, I got to run outside. And I'm like, you know, and I'm dry heaving, and I'm getting, what I'm getting is anxiety attacks. Okay? Because all the pressure building up, and I said, God, something's got to give here. I can't exist like this. This is not going to work. Because that was only my first year. That was only the first half year of the program. And I'm saying, this is not going to work. And most of the times, like PhDs, you have to have a level of degree of gifting and intelligence to go through a PhD. But the hardest part of it is it's just life hits you. You've got life. And so jobs and families and all this kind of stuff, that's the reason only 10% of people that start out to do a PhD end up getting one, not because they're so smart. It's because all these other things just butt into your life. So I'm going to fall into this category because I can't survive like this. Well, I'm looking and I'm reading the Bible, and I'm reading this thing on the Sabbath. And I'm saying, gosh, Lord, you really put a lot of relevance on this Sabbath thing. If you've ever read the Old Testament, you see where somebody goes out there in the desert and God tells them, on the Sabbath, you don't do anything. You take a break, you take your rest, and that's what you do. So they go, oh, sure enough, this guy says, that doesn't bother me, I'm going on. He's collecting sticks for a fire, whatever it is. It might have been chilly, he wanted a fire. But he didn't think of on Saturday, the day before, you collect the sticks so you have enough for the next day for the Sabbath. So bring him back in. He violated the Sabbath. Moses asked him, says, Lord, what should we do? He says, kill him. Wait a minute here. All the guy did was just walk out and collect some sticks on the Sabbath. Plenty of people here are out there in the yard cutting the grass, working their butts off on Sundays. And what's the deal here? And you'll find that a few times. God just says, kill him. So obviously this Sabbath thing has some relevance. So I looked at that and I'm saying, okay, Lord, I just can't, I can't take all day. It would just drive me crazy to just take all Sunday. And then I'm reading and I'm looking at that and I'm saying, you know what? The Sabbath was from 6 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock the next day. So all the Sabbath is just 24 hours of rest. So I could actually, Saturday nights I try to study a little bit into the night, but then I'd take my break, and then I'd go to church on Sunday morning, and then I'd probably watch the Steeler game. Right after that, I had boom, hit it.